Okay, so now we move on to the next part of the project where we start to look at the art movement that we're going to be using to help inspire our prints that we're going to be completing. So we're going to be looking at German Expressionism, and these images just here are an example of what that looks like. And you can see that they've got these very kind of linear designs and patterns on them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our portraits, and you can choose which one you want to use, either your side profile or your front face-on portrait. I think I'm probably going to go for my, let's take my front-on portrait. Now, to save time, we're going to use the portrait that we've already drawn and we're going to trace around it. So when we're doing this tracing, you can press a little harder. And we're going to trace everything except for the grid lines because we don't need those anymore. They were really useful for us to help us map out what we were doing. But now what we need is just the outline of the head and the features. So we're going to go around and we're just going to pick out that outline, those lines that we've put in. Okay, so that's just the basic lines of my face that I've traced out there. Now what we're going to do, because our faces are roughly symmetrical, they're actually not, but for this exercise we can get away with it. We're going to flip that tracing over and we're going to go to the next clear page of our book. Now what happens when we do this is the lead that we've just used to trace out is now on this side of the tracing. When I flip it over, that lead is now on top of this piece of paper here, this page here. If I, holding it very still and making sure it doesn't move, go over those lines, again, pressing quite firmly, what's going to happen is those lines that I've drawn are going to get pressed onto the surface of the paper, and the lead is going to transfer from the tracing paper onto the paper itself. And when I lift it up, you can see that those lines have very faintly come through onto this page. Now at this point, we don't need to go over the top of these lines because then we're going to start to look at these images in front of us. And we're going to look at what we've got and we're going to try to incorporate these lines into this design, and we're going to start to stylize it and we're going to make it look like this kind of German Expressionism that we can see here. So the thing that we want to look at is that it's all very angular. Now we do have some curves. You can see some here on the ear and you can see some curves around the eye, so it's okay to hold on to some of them. But you can also see that there's lots and lots of lines, and they're also, and this is the really important bit, they're also black and white. So when I'm looking at the eyes, the middle of every single one of these eyes on here has been completely blacked out. So I'm going to start with that. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to shade out the middle of the eye, like so. Because that for me really feels like a safe place to start. It's on every single one of the images in front of me. I think, you know, it's obviously a trait of this movement, and I think it's just going to give me a little bit of confidence just to get started on this image. Then what I'm going to do is look at what's happening around the outside of the eyes. Now, the eyelashes here are these zigzags, the same for the top ones here. On here they appear as lines, and this guy here doesn't look like he's got any. So I think what I'm going to do, I think the lines look a little bit more sophisticated. So what I'm actually going to do here now is bring up some lines off the top of my eye. Before I finish those off, I'm going to give a nice solid eyelid, like so. And then using my pencil, I'm going to draw in those eyelashes. Then I'm going to have a look at my bottom lid. I'm going to bring that in as a nice thick solid line as well. And then I'm just going to spend a little bit of time looking and starting to pick out different ways that the different features of the face have been approached by these different artists, and then start to incorporate bits that I like into my own drawing. Make sure that you have a nice sharp pencil so that you can get nice dark lines. Okay, so I think I'm nearly finished with my face and I'm quite happy with how that looks. I think that I could keep going and maybe add a few more little bits of detail under the eye. There's some quite nice shapes happening here, which I might add in a second. But what I want to talk to you about just briefly is it doesn't stop just at the face. So now what we want to do is we want to bring this out into the background. And if you look at the background of all of these, you can see that they've got some really nice marks happening in them. Very simple. But still very effective marks happening here, and then some slightly more complex ones happening in this one and in this one. You can choose how you want them to look. I think generally speaking we want to stick with this kind of quite straight line look because that's very synonymous with German Expressionism. But just look at the images in front of you, decide how you want it to do, and then just start marking that in. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave that like that now. I think that's enough detail. And then we will move on to the next. I think I'll just put that one line across the top there. I think that's going to finish that off a little bit better. And then we'll be ready to move on to our next stage.